My son humiliated me in front of 200 people by saying I did not even pay for his birthday cake. I smiled, I hugged him, and I left in silence. The next morning, the $4 million company he was going to inherit no longer existed in his name. Before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the bell because we publish new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city and country you are watching from. My name is David Miller. I am 62 years old, and for 40 years I built something bigger than a company. I built a legacy for my son Michael. Or at least that is what I believed until that night in March 2024 when I discovered that the man I raised no longer existed. My story begins in the year 1985 when Emily, my wife, and I took out a second mortgage on the small apartment her parents gave us as a wedding gift. We were 23 years old, with no business experience, and a dream that many called madness. We wanted to start a food distribution company in Chicago. The first 5 years I worked 16 hours a day from Monday to Sunday. I loaded boxes personally. I drove the van. I visited every store, every bar, every restaurant in the Midwest. Emily got pregnant in 1987. I remember perfectly the day Michael was born. The 22nd of April, 1988. He weighed 7 pounds. He had his mother's dark eyes and a powerful scream that filled the entire room at City General Hospital. I held my son in my arms. I felt his little heart beating against my chest, and I made him a silent promise. He would never go through the hardships I went through. He would have everything I did not have. He would study in good private schools. He would wear new clothes. He would see the ocean. He would have a dignified life. And I kept that promise. Every single day for 35 years I kept it without ever complaining. Michael grew up seeing his father leave before dawn and return when he was already asleep. But weekends were sacred for us. We went to Wrigley Field to watch the Cubs. We walked along the lakefront collecting rocks. We played in Grant Park. Emily prepared huge pot roasts on Sundays, and the three of us ate together laughing, telling stories, planning the future. One day, son, all this will be yours. I would tell him, pointing to the warehouses we opened in the suburbs in the year 2003. We will work together, you and I, taking the Miller name across America. My son studied business administration at the University of Chicago. It cost me almost $200,000 between tuition, books, housing, and personal expenses over 5 years. I never threw it in his face. Never. It was my obligation as a father to give him opportunities that I never had. When he graduated in 2010 with good grades, I immediately brought him into the company as an assistant manager. I wanted him to learn from the bottom up, to understand every department, every process, every sacrifice behind every invoice. The following years were probably the best of my life. Michael worked by my side every day. He learned fast. He asked smart questions. He proposed improvements for the logistics systems. Emily and I celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary in 2015 with a small family dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown. My wife took my hand over the white tablecloth and whispered with that smile that I had been in love with for 3 decades. We did it, David. We built something beautiful together. I did not know that we only had 4 years left. Emily died on the 14th of March 2019. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in October of the previous year. Too late. It advanced too fast. From the diagnosis to her last breath, only 5 months passed. 5 months of aggressive chemotherapy. Hospitals that smelled of fear and disinfectant. Medical hopes that vanished every week. Michael was present during those dark months. He visited his mother 3 times a week. He brought her favorite red carnations. He sat by her bed holding her hand for hours, while I worked 12 hours a day to pay for experimental treatments that the oncologists already knew were useless. The morning Emily died, Michael and I were next to her in room 207. My wife opened her eyes for the last time. She looked at both of us with that deep gaze that held all her love and smiled weakly. Take care of each other. Those were her last words, barely a whisper. Then she simply stopped breathing. 32 years of marriage ended in that cold room smelling of medicine and withered flowers. The funeral was huge. Emily was loved by hundreds of people, company employees, old clients, neighbors from the old neighborhood, friends of a lifetime. Michael spoke beautiful words about his mother, about the strong woman who raised him with infinite love, about the exemplary marriage he witnessed for 35 years. He cried, hugging me in front of everyone. I also cried without shame. At that moment, holding him against my chest while he trembled with grief, I thought that at least we had each other, that the shared pain would keep us united as Emily would have wanted. The first months after losing Emily were absolutely devastating. The house felt like an empty mausoleum, without her contagious laugh, without her warm presence filling every corner. I kept setting 2 plates at the dining table out of pure habit and then brutally remembering that I would eat alone again. Michael came every Sunday religiously during that first year. We ate together in heavy silence. We shared memories of Emily. We looked through old photo albums. Sometimes we cried, hugging each other. Sometimes we smiled, remembering her jokes. They were hard moments, but necessary to heal together. But in October 2021, exactly 2 years and a half after the funeral, Michael met someone. The first weeks were normal. Michael kept coming on Sundays, but now he spoke mainly about Jessica. He told me about their dates, their plans, their conversations until late at night. I listened patiently while I prepared the Sunday roast, Emily's favorite dish that I continued cooking every Sunday by tradition. "Dad, I think she is special," he confessed one afternoon in November, while we drank coffee on the porch. "I want you to meet her soon." I met her formally in December 2021 during a dinner at my house. Jessica arrived dressed elegantly with a bouquet of expensive flowers and impeccable manners. She spoke well. She smiled at the right moments. She asked polite questions about the company, but there was something in her eyes that did not quite convince me. A coldness behind the courtesy. A constant évaluation. She looked at the paintings, the furniture, the porcelain dishes that Emily collected, as if appraising every object. Michael was captivated, hanging on her every word, transformed into someone anxious to impress her. During dinner, Jessica casually mentioned her family. "My father, Robert Turner, owns textile companies in New York and Boston. He exports to Europe since 30 years ago." The way she said it with that subtle but unmistakable pride made me understand something. She was establishing hierarchies, comparing. Michael felt enthusiastic. "Mr. Turner is incredible, Dad. He manages 4 companies simultaneously. He travels constantly to Europe." I smiled politely, but discomfort settled in my stomach. January 2022 brought the first canceled Sunday. Michael called Saturday night. "Dad, sorry, but Jessica and I are going to spend the weekend in the Hamptons. Her cousins organized a family reunion." Understandable. Normal. "Do not worry, son. Have fun." I hung up the phone and looked at the dining table where I had already prepared ingredients to cook our traditional Sunday meal. I put everything away in silence. February. 3 Sundays canceled out of 4. "Dad, we have a commitment with Jessica's parents. Dad Robert invited us to his beach house in Florida." "Dad, I am exhausted. I need to rest this weekend." Every excuse arrived by text message, never calls, short answers, empty emojis. I always responded the same. "It is okay, son. See you when you can." But the truth is that every Sunday I sat alone at that big table looking at the empty chair where Emily used to sit, and now also the empty chair where Michael used to laugh telling stories. I ate in silence, listening only to the noise of the fork against the ceramic plate. The house resonated with echoes of past conversations, of laughter that no longer existed. March 2022. Michael formally announced his engagement to Jessica during a dinner at the Turner's house to which I was invited. Robert Turner turned out to be exactly what I imagined. A 65-year-old man, heavy-set, powerful voice, dominant presence that filled any room. He greeted me with strong slaps on the back and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "David Miller." Finally. "Michael speaks wonders of you and your little distribution business in Chicago." Little. That word was left floating in the air like an offense disguised as a compliment. The Turner house in the suburbs was ostentatious. Italian marble floors, German crystal chandeliers, original paintings on every wall. During dinner, Robert monopolized every conversation, talking about his international contracts, his contacts in Paris, his diversified investments. Michael listened fascinated, nodding at every sentence, laughing exaggeratedly at every mediocre joke. I remained silent, observing how my son made himself small in front of that man trying desperately to win his approval. "Michael tells me he works in your family business," Robert commented, pouring himself more expensive wine. "How nice to maintain traditions, although the modern business world demands globalized vision." Disruptive strategies. Jessica smiled at her father with adoration. Michael nodded vigorously. Exactly, Mr. Turner. I have been suggesting to Dad to modernize some processes. He looked at me seeking validation. I felt a strange pang in my chest. April, May, June 2022. Family Sundays disappeared completely. Michael spent every weekend with the Turners. When I tried to call him, he answered hurriedly. Dad, I am busy, I will call you later. He never called later. Our conversations were reduced to brief exchanges about work matters. In the office, he was professional, efficient, distant. The affectionate son who hugged me spontaneously had been replaced by a polite employee. I started eating dinner alone permanently. I bought takeout because cooking for one made no sense. I sat in front of the television without paying real attention, simply needing noise to fill the overwhelming silence. The photographs of Emily on the mantelpiece seemed to look at me with sadness. Forgive me, I whispered sometimes. I do not know what I am doing wrong with our son. July 2022 brought a disturbing revelation. Michael arrived at my office accompanied by Robert without prior notice. Dad, Mr. Turner wants to see our facilities, to see how we operate. They spent 2 hours touring the warehouses, while Robert asked pointed questions about volumes, margins, suppliers, contracts, questions too specific for simple curiosity. Michael answered everything enthusiastically, revealing confidential information without thinking twice. October, November, December. The year 2022 ended with a Christmas dinner at the Turner's house where I was invited as a mere formality. Michael spent the entire evening glued to Robert discussing expansion strategies. Emerging markets, merger opportunities. Jessica hung from my son's arm, showing off a huge engagement ring. They had gotten engaged in November without Michael consulting me, or informing me in advance, or including me in the moment. I found out through a photo on social media that a cousin showed me. Congratulations, son, I told him over the phone that night. Thanks, Dad, he answered hurriedly before hanging up, saying he had guests. The year 2023 witnessed the definitive distancing. Michael married Jessica in April. A luxurious wedding at a country club with 300 guests where I occupied a side seat far from the main table. Robert gave an emotional speech about his new son, about the bright future that awaits them together. I was not invited to speak. I applauded politely. I smiled for the obligatory photos and drove back to the city alone, crying on the highway while remembering the boy I held in the hospital 35 years ago. The following months were a fog of loneliness. Michael visited the office. He worked efficiently but avoided personal conversations. Jessica never came to see my house. She never showed interest in her husband's family. Sundays became eternal days where I wandered through empty rooms, speaking to photographs of Emily apologizing for failing our son. And then came March 2024. On March 10th, I received a digital invitation via email. Birthday celebration of Michael Miller. Saturday, March 16th, 8 p.m. The Grand Ballroom. Formal, cold, impersonal, like inviting a distant acquaintance. I called Michael immediately. Son, are you going to celebrate your birthday? I did not know anything. There was an awkward silence. Jessica organized everything, Dad. It is something big. Obviously, you are invited. Something big. Obviously. Words that sounded hollow. Do you need help with the costs? I offered genuinely. I can help with the hall, the food, whatever you need. Michael let out a brief laugh. Strange. Do not worry. It is all covered. Just come and enjoy. He hung up quickly. I stood there holding the phone, feeling a dark premonition running down my back. On Saturday, March 16th, I dressed carefully. A gray suit that Emily had given me years ago. Navy blue tie. Polished shoes. I drove to the Grand Ballroom downtown. It was an exclusive place normally reserved for high-level corporate events. The parking lot was full of luxury vehicles. Mercedes, Audis, BMWs. I swallowed hard. I entered the hall and stood paralyzed. There were easily 200 people. Ostentatious decoration with gigantic floral arrangements. Professional lighting. Open bar with uniformed waiters. Tables covered with white linen tablecloths. Elaborate centerpieces. A huge screen projected photographs of Michael in a loop. Live music played by a jazz quartet. This had cost a fortune. Tens of thousands of dollars minimum. I looked for Michael. I found him surrounded by guests I recognized immediately. Robert's business partners, businessmen from New York, colleagues from the textile world. Very few familiar faces from my circle. Michael wore a very expensive Italian suit. He laughed loudly. He toasted with glasses of French champagne. Jessica shone by his side with a designer dress and dazzling jewelry. I approached slowly. "Happy birthday, son." Michael turned around. He saw me. His expression changed barely perceptibly. "Dad, you made it. Thanks for coming." A mechanical hug. Quick, without warmth. "This place is impressive," I commented, looking around. Michael smiled with pride. Robert insisted on doing something memorable. "Robert. Again, Robert. Let me introduce you to some people," he said, dragging me towards groups where he introduced me hurriedly before walking away. I spent 2 hours alone holding a glass of wine without drinking, observing my son shine among strangers. Nobody really spoke to me. I was the invisible father, the irrelevant old man in the corner. Robert dominated the room, slapping backs, telling stories, receiving attention. Michael gravitated constantly towards him, seeking his approval, his recognition. Then came the moment that would change everything forever. Michael went up to the small stage where the quartet was. He took the wireless microphone. The music stopped. All conversations halted. 200 pairs of eyes turned towards him. "Good evening, everyone," he began with his amplified voice resonating in the hall. "I want to thank each one of you for joining me on this special night." Polite applause. I smiled from my corner, hoping, perhaps naively, for some acknowledgement. "Especially," Michael continued, and my heart raced, anticipating his words. "I want to thank deeply my father-in-law, Robert Turner." He pointed towards Robert, who raised his glass with false modesty. Robert paid for absolutely everything for this incredible event. The hall, the food, the music, the flowers, everything. Because my father, he paused. He looked directly at me across the crowd. He did not even want to pay for the cake. Time stopped. Laughter. First nervous, then open. 200 people laughing, some looking at me with pity, others with contempt, the majority simply amused by the cruel joke. Robert smiled triumphantly. Jessica covered her mouth, pretending surprise. Michael kept holding the microphone, waiting for more reactions, enjoying his moment. For a few eternal seconds I could not move. My legs weighed tons. The air in the room became dense, unbreathable. I felt heat rising up my neck, burning in my cheeks. Tears threatened to flow, but something inside me, some vestige of ancient pride, refused to allow it. Not here, not in front of these people. I would not give that additional pleasure to Robert, who watched me with a victorious smile from his center table. So I did the only thing my battered dignity allowed me. I smiled. It was a forced smile, probably crooked, but a smile nonetheless. I left my glass on the nearest table with a trembling hand. I walked towards the stage, crossing the sea of guests who moved aside as if I were contagious. Every step required monumental effort. I walked up the steps. I approached Michael, who still held the microphone, looking satisfied. I hugged him. It was a cold hug, mechanical, lacking all affection. My arms surrounded his back rigidly while he reciprocated with superficial pats. "Happy birthday, son," I whispered close to his ear, low enough so only he could hear. My voice came out more broken than planned. Michael tensed slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone, but he said nothing. I separated quickly. I turned towards the crowd. I maintained that forced smile a few seconds more. I nodded briefly as if accepting the joke, and I walked down from the stage. The music resumed almost immediately. Conversations resumed their course. I was irrelevant again. The moment of amusement had passed. I walked towards the exit without looking back, without saying goodbye, without seeking explanations. I crossed the luxurious lobby with legs that barely responded. I handed the ticket to the valet parking with trembling hands. I waited 5 endless minutes under the artificial lights of the building while my 2015 Ford sedan was brought around. A modest car compared to the luxury German vehicles surrounding the parking lot. I got into the car. I closed the door. I started the engine. I drove towards the exit slowly, professionally. I turned left joining the night traffic of Chicago. It was 11:15 at night, Saturday. The city glowed with youthful life. Groups of young people laughed on the sidewalks. Couples walked holding hands. The world continued normally while mine crumbled. I drove aimlessly. I passed through downtown. I crossed the bridge over the river. I took empty avenues towards the outskirts. My hands gripped the steering wheel with painful force. I was breathing heavily. The knot in my throat grew unbearable. Finally, on a dark residential street, I stopped. I turned off the engine. Absolute silence. Only the distant sound of some television on in a nearby house. I looked forward, seeing nothing really, lost in the void. And then I broke completely. I cried, like I had not cried since Emily's funeral. Deep sobs. Violent, heartbreaking shakes that racked my whole body. I hit the steering wheel with helplessness. I screamed inside the closed car. 40 years of work, sacrifices, unconditional love, reduced to a cruel joke in front of 200 strangers. My son chose to humiliate me publicly, to win the approval of a man who openly manipulated him. Tears fogged my glasses. I took them off. I left them on the passenger seat. I covered my face with both hands. I thought of Emily. "Forgive me," I whispered towards the roof of the vehicle. "I failed our son. I did not know how to protect him. I did not know how to teach him what really matters." I felt her absence as an open wound again. 5 years without her, and it still hurt like the first day. I remained like that I do not know how long. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Eventually the tears ran out. The crying gave way to ragged breathing. Then to long sighs. Finally to a hollow silence. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my jacket. I put my glasses back on. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. A 62-year-old man. Red eyes, gaunt face, devastated expression, but something had changed in those minutes of absolute pain. A cold clarity emerged from the center of my chest. A decision crystallizing. I was not going to keep living like this. I would not beg for my son's affection anymore. I would not plead for crumbs of attention. I would not accept humiliation after humiliation, hoping that one day Michael would remember who sacrificed everything for him. Emily would have wanted me to take care of myself, to respect myself, and that is what I would do. I started the engine again. I looked at the dashboard clock, 12:37 in the morning. I took my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Michael, probably worried about appearances, not about me, really. I ignored the notifications. Instead of answering, I looked for a specific contact in my agenda. Sarah Evans, lawyer specializing in commercial law and estates. She had worked with me years ago on the legal restructuring of the company. A brilliant woman, meticulous, discreet. I sent her a text message. "Sarah, I need to meet urgently on Monday. Confidential and delicate matter. Available first hour?" The answer arrived surprisingly fast for being midnight on a Saturday. "Good morning, David." "Sure, 8 in the morning at my office. Is everything okay?" "Soon everything will be okay," I replied. "Thanks." I finally drove home. The apartment where Emily and I lived for 30 years. Where we raised Michael. Where we shared thousands of meals, conversations, laughter, dreams. Now empty, except for memories and photographs. I entered without turning on lights. I went straight to my study. I turned on the desk lamp. I took out folders carefully filed for decades, company and corporation documents, business records, contracts, wills, powers of attorney. Everything perfectly organized as I always used to do. I passed the rest of that early morning reviewing every paper, every clause, every signature, taking notes, calculating, planning meticulously. I finally replied to Michael at 9. "I am fine. Needed fresh air. We will talk later." Nothing more. Dry. Distant. Like he had been with me for 3 years. On Monday, March 18th, I arrived at Sarah Evans's office punctually at 8. Her office was in the financial district, 3rd floor of a restored historic building. Sarah received me personally, observing me with that professional look that evaluates instantly. She was 48, brown hair pulled back impeccably, pearl gray suit, serious but warm expression. "David, sit down. You look terrible," she said frankly, closing the door of her private office. Coffee? Water? Coffee, please? She sat in front of me, crossed her hands over the dark mahogany desk. Tell me what is happening. I told her everything, from Emily's death to Jessica, Robert, the progressive distancing, and finally the public humiliation on Saturday. Sarah listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally in her leather notebook. When I finished, she remained silent for a few moments, processing the information. I understand perfectly your pain, David. She began finally with a professional but understanding voice. But I need you to be brutally honest with me. What exactly do you want to achieve? The question caught me off guard. I want to protect myself. Protect what I built. Not allow Robert to use my son to absorb my company. Sarah nodded slowly. Are you willing to take drastic decisions that will permanently change your relationship with Michael? I looked out the window towards the street where anonymous people walked hurriedly towards their jobs. I thought of Emily, of the promises I made her, of the son I lost gradually. There is no relationship left to preserve, Sarah. He chose his path. Then let us act quickly, she replied, opening her laptop. First, I need full access to all the legal documentation of your company. Corporate structure, shares, powers granted, current wills, everything. Second, I want you this week to discreetly look for any suspicious document on Michael's desk. Preliminary contracts, agreements, correspondence with Robert. I need to know exactly what they are planning. I left that meeting with renewed purpose. Sarah had awakened something in me. Business survival instinct. For 40 years, I built that distributor from scratch. I would not allow it to be absorbed through family manipulation. That afternoon, Monday, I arrived at the office after 6 when most of the staff had left. Michael was still working in his office. I knocked on his door. Come in, he replied without looking up from his computer. I entered. Son, about Saturday. He finally looked at me. Guilty expression, but defensive. Dad, it was just a joke. I did not think you would take it so badly. A joke? He reduced my public humiliation to a joke. Michael, that joke humiliated me in front of 200 people, I said calmly, controlling my rage. But I did not come to discuss that. I came to ask you. Are you happy working here? He seemed confused by the change of subject. Of course, Dad. Why do you ask? Simple curiosity. Lately you seem distant, uninterested. Maybe you prefer to explore other opportunities. He tensed visibly. No, not at all. This company is my future. You know that. Your future. Not our future. His future. I am glad to hear it. Then I expect greater commitment from now on, I said firmly before leaving. I needed him to believe that everything continued normally while I investigated discreetly. The next day, Tuesday, I took advantage of Michael going to an external meeting with clients. I entered his office with the master key that I, as the owner, possessed. My heart was beating rapidly. Searching my own son's desk made me feel dirty, but it was necessary. I opened drawers carefully. Pens, business cards, routine invoices, nothing relevant. I checked his filing cabinet, standard contracts, monthly reports. I turned on his computer, but it required a password. I could not risk it. Then I saw a manila folder semi-hidden behind his monitor. I took it. Inside were printed drafts of legal documents. The titles froze my blood. Business Merger Proposal Miller-Turner, Post-Integration Financial Projection, Consolidated Administrative Structure. I read quickly, photographing every page with my cell phone. The plan was simple but devastating. Robert proposed acquiring my company through what they called a friendly merger, taking advantage of my advanced age and natural desire to retire. Michael would be named regional director with a fixed salary but without real power. Robert would absorb clients, contracts, employees. The Miller brand would disappear completely. There were printed emails exchanged between Michael and Robert since January 2024. 2 months of planning behind my back. Your father is old school. He needs renewal, Robert wrote. Let me handle the transition smoothly, Michael responded. I trust you, Robert. Dad will understand it is for the best. I felt physical nausea reading those words. My son conspired actively against me for months. I photographed everything meticulously. I returned the folder exactly where it was. I cleaned any trace of my presence. I left his office breathing heavily. I returned to my own office, locked the door. Downloaded the photos to my laptop and sent them encrypted to Sarah. She replied 30 minutes later. Solid evidence. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bring all original corporate documents. That night, reviewing the photos again at home, something broke definitively inside me. It was not just business betrayal. It was deep filial betrayal. Michael consciously chose to deceive me, manipulate me, prepare me for a forced retirement disguised as a friendly transition. While I included him in every important decision for years, he conspired to hand over my legacy to Robert. Sarah reviewed every paper meticulously for 40 minutes without uttering a word. Finally, she looked up. David, legally you have absolute control. You own 95% of the shares. Michael owns only a symbolic 5% that you gave him at his wedding. You can act without his consent. It is up to you. What do you propose? Sell? Quickly. Before Robert finds out and tries to block it legally or through the media. She responded with professional determination. I know several investment groups interested in consolidated distributors like yours. Specifically, Midwest Logistics from Detroit has been looking to expand into the Chicago area for months. They work with very high standards, pay well, and respect acquired brands. How much time would you need? I asked, feeling adrenaline run through my veins. 3 weeks maximum if you agree to negotiate aggressively. I will contact the acquisitions director today. Send financial prospectus tomorrow. Face-to-face meeting within 3 days. Due diligence express of 1 week. Document closing in 15 days. She calculated quickly on her laptop. Based on your last annual balance sheets, conservative valuation would be around $4 million for the 80% stake. $4 million. A fortune. More than necessary to live comfortably the rest of my days. Do it, I said firmly. Contact them today. Negotiate as best as possible. I want this closed before April. Sarah nodded already, typing emails on her computer. One more thing, David. The apartment on Lakeshore Drive that you promised Michael as a future gift, is it legally in your name still? Completely. I bought it in 2020 with personal funds. It is worth approximately $500,000 currently. Transfer it to someone else, trusted family member immediately, she instructed. If Michael tries to sue you later claiming verbal promises, that asset must be out of your legal reach. I thought quickly. My niece Ashley, daughter of my deceased brother, 32 years old, elementary school teacher, single, lives modestly. She was always affectionate with me, especially after Emily died. Perfect. I will draft the donation deed tomorrow. Sign before a notary the day after tomorrow. Transfer completed in a week. Sarah confirmed, taking notes. We will also cancel all powers Michael has. Bank accounts, authorized signatures, administrative access, everything. He will be completely out of the corporate structure. I left that meeting transformed. I was no longer the hurt father begging for affection. I was a businessman protecting 40 years of work against family predators. The following days were dizzying. Sarah worked tirelessly. On Thursday, she contacted Midwest Logistics. On Friday, they sent a preliminary letter of intent. On Monday, March 25th, the acquisitions director, a meticulous man named Peter, arrived in Chicago. We met in a neutral conference room of a downtown hotel, not at my offices to avoid rumors. Peter was 50. Impressive experience in business consolidations. Direct approach. Mr. Miller, your company genuinely interests us. Solid distribution. Loyal clients. Experienced employees. We want to expand, preserving the good things you built. I presented financial balance sheets for the last 5 years, current contracts with wholesale suppliers, updated client portfolio, inventory evaluations, cash flow analysis. Everything impeccable. 40 years operating cleanly were reflected in those numbers. Peter reviewed every document, attentively asking technical questions that I answered honestly. Why sell now? He finally asked the inevitable question. I had prepared that answer carefully. I am 62, widowed 5 years ago. My son chose another career path. I have no heirs interested in continuing this. I prefer to sell to serious buyers than let it deteriorate slowly. Technically true, although omitting painful details. Peter nodded understandingly. I understand perfectly. I propose a valuation of $5 million for 100% of the shares. You retain 20% as passive investment if you want residual income, or we sell 80% for $4 million payable completely at closing. I looked at Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. 80%. One single payment. No future participation, I replied. We closed the preliminary agreement that same afternoon. Peter initiated due diligence immediately with a team of auditors that arrived from Detroit. For a week they reviewed absolutely everything. Account books, tax returns, labor contracts, property titles of warehouses, health records, operating licenses. They found 0 irregularities, 40 years of honest and transparent management. Michael suspected nothing. I continued arriving at the office normally, supervising routine operations, maintaining appearances. The auditors worked discreetly in the file room, introducing themselves as operational efficiency consultants. My son was too busy planning with Robert to notice details. On Friday, April 5th, Sarah called me. Everything ready. Document closing scheduled for Monday, April 8th. 10 a.m. Law office on State Street. Bring identification and prepare to sign a lot. My hand trembled slightly holding the phone. It was real. It was happening. That weekend was surreal. I walked through my house touching furniture Emily chose, looking at photos of Michael as a child, remembering decades of family life. I did not feel regret. I felt anticipated liberation. On Saturday, I visited my niece Ashley. She lives in a nearby suburb. Small but cozy apartment. I explained everything honestly. Michael's betrayal, my decision to sell, the apartment I would transfer to her name. Ashley cried, hugging me. Uncle David, I am so sorry for what Michael did to you. You do not deserve that pain. That is why I need to protect myself, Ashley. That apartment is worth $500,000. It will be legally yours, but I trust you will never use it against me. Never, Uncle. Never, she promised solemnly. Monday, April 8th, 10 a.m. Elegant law office in downtown Chicago. Sarah waited for me along with Peter and the legal team of Midwest Logistics. We signed for 2 hours. Sale and purchase deeds, share transfers, revoked powers, liability releases. My signature appeared hundreds of times on official documents. I drove straight home. I turned off my cell phone. I needed silence before the inevitable storm. Meanwhile, as I learned later from loyal employees, Michael arrived at the office at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon. He found the parking lot full of unknown vehicles. He entered the building confused. The receptionist Linda, who had been working with me for 20 years, stopped him nervously. Mr. Michael, there are new people in management. They say they are the new owners. Michael paled instantly. He ran up the stairs towards his office. He found the door locked. Inside, 2 men in suits were reviewing files. He knocked furiously. A man of about 40 opened. Yes? How can I help you? This is my office. Who are you? Michael demanded with an altered voice. We are representatives of Midwest Logistics, new majority owners as of today. You are Michael Miller, the owner's son. The man consulted a digital tablet. Michael Miller. Here it is. Operations manager until today. Your employment contract has been terminated effective immediately. You have until 5 p.m. to collect personal belongings. Security will accompany you. Michael recoiled as if he had received a physical blow. This is impossible. My father would not do this. You must be mistaken. He ran towards my office on the 3rd floor. The door was also locked. He knocked desperately. Nobody answered. He went down looking for Linda. Where is my father? Linda had tears in her eyes. I do not know, Mr. Michael. I only know that this morning these gentlemen arrived with official documents saying they bought the company. Mr. David has not come today. Michael took out his phone, trembling. He dialed my number. Voicemail. Dad, answer. Please. What is going on? He dialed again. Voicemail again. Voicemail. During the next 4 hours, he called 29 times exactly. He left increasingly desperate messages that I listened to days later. Message 1, 2:40 p.m. Dad, there are people saying you sold the company. Tell me it is a mistake. Message 5, 3:10 p.m. Dad, answer. This cannot be happening. You sold without telling me anything? Message 12, 4:05 p.m. Dad, please, I need to talk to you. I am scared. Call me. Message 2-2, 5:30 p.m. Dad, forgive me. Forgive me for Saturday. Forgive me for everything. But do not do this to me. I am your son. Message 29, 6:40 p.m. I do not know what to say anymore. Just call me when you can. But I did not call. Not that night. Michael, desperate, contacted Robert. They met at a coffee shop near the offices at 7 in the evening. As a waiter I knew told me later, Robert arrived visibly furious. How did you let this happen? He shouted at him as soon as they sat down. I do not know. Dad never mentioned anything. There were never signs, Michael replied with a broken voice. Signs? You humiliated your father publicly and you did not even have the decency to watch him afterwards. Robert spat with contempt. That old man played us masterfully. He sold while we were planning the merger. Now we have nothing. 3 months of work lost. Michael tried to defend himself. Robert, can we talk to him? Convince him to reverse it? Do not be naive. That sale is closed legally. Your father is not stupid. He hired good lawyers. Robert stood up abruptly. I thought you were smarter, Michael. I thought you knew how to handle your father. I was wrong about you. He left $20 on the table and left the cafe without looking back. Michael remained sitting alone, holding his head with both hands. When he arrived home that night, Jessica was waiting for him. She had heard rumors. The business world is small. News travels fast. Is it true? She asked, with an icy voice, as soon as Michael entered. Your father sold the company you were going to inherit. Michael nodded miserably. He sold 80%. I have no job anymore. There is no future inheritance. The silence that followed was crushing. Jessica walked towards the window, looking at the night city. My father invested a lot of time in you, thinking you had a solid business future. Expenses on that ridiculous party to impress contacts. Introductions to important partners. And it turns out your father is smarter than all of us together. She turned, looking at him with calculated coldness. What do you have now, Michael? What do you offer me? I have savings. I will look for another job. I am an experienced manager. He tried to defend himself weakly. Jessica let out a bitter laugh. Manager who just got fired by the new owners. That reputation will follow you. Everyone will know you lost the family business for being an idiot. Her words were knives. I need time to think about what to do with this marriage, she added finally before locking herself in the bedroom. Michael spent that night on the living room sofa, looking at the ceiling, replaying every wrong decision. The public humiliation on Saturday. The canceled Sundays. The secret conversations with Robert. The merger plans made behind his father's back. Everything led him to this devastating moment. On Tuesday, April 9th, he tried to locate me physically. He went to my house. He knocked on the door for 20 minutes. I did not open. I was inside listening to him, but without moving. Dad, I know you are there. Your car is in the garage. Please open. We need to talk. He shouted from the hallway. Neighbors started looking. Eventually he gave up. He went to the law office seeking information. The lawyers could not reveal details due to professional confidentiality, but confirmed that the transaction was legal and irreversible. Michael left there completely destroyed. On Wednesday, he discovered another devastation. He received official notification. The apartment on Lakeshore Drive that I had verbally promised him for years now legally belonged to Ashley. Transfer registered on April 3rd, 5 days before the business sale. Everything meticulously planned. $500,000 in real estate. Evaporated. The future financial security he took for granted. Non-existent. Michael called Ashley furious. She answered, crying. Michael, your father explained everything to me. What you did to him. How you betrayed him. That apartment is legally mine now, and I will never give it to you. She hung up, blocking his number. I had made that decision on the night of Monday, April 8th, after signing at the notary. I arrived home, packed 2 suitcases with essential clothes, some books, photographs of Emily. I left furniture, appliances, material memories. I just wanted to escape Chicago and its painful ghosts. I needed physical and emotional distance. I chose Santa Barbara, California for practical and sentimental reasons. Emily and I had spent our honeymoon there in 1983. 3 magical days walking by the ocean, eating seafood, dreaming of the future. We always promised to return, but 40 years of ceaseless work prevented that return. Now finally I would return alone, but free. On Tuesday, April 9th, I drove for days crossing America. I left behind the Midwest, heading to the West Coast. Every mile traveled lightened the weight on my chest. I crossed the plains, the mountains, finally the green hills of California. I arrived in Santa Barbara at dusk. The city glowed, reflected in the ocean waters. I breathed deeply the salty air. For the first time in months, I felt something resembling peace. I stayed initially in a modest hotel. For 2 weeks, I looked for permanent housing. I found a perfect apartment, second floor, 2 bedrooms, balcony with partial ocean view, $3,000 monthly rent. I signed a 1-year lease immediately. I bought basic furniture. I turned that anonymous space into a temporary home. The first weeks were strange. Waking up without work obligations after 40 years generated vertigo. I walked through the city for hours aimlessly. I walked along the pier. I sat on benches, watching the ocean, reading novels. I never had time to enjoy simply existing without pressures. Gradually, I established new routines. I ate breakfast at home quietly. Coffee, toast. After that, I walked to the historic downtown, Spanish colonial buildings, plazas full of life. I discovered a family cafe called The Daily Grind. It was a tiny place, barely 6 tables run by an older couple, Tom and Mary, who had been serving perfect coffees for 30 years. I became a regular customer. I arrived every morning at 10. I ordered coffee with milk and a croissant. I read the local newspaper for an hour. The owners began to greet me by name after the first week. It was in that cafe exactly on May 1st where I met Linda. She arrived that sunny spring morning looking for a table. The cafe was unusually full. Tom pointed to me. "Share a table with David. He is a good man. He does not bother anyone." Linda hesitated momentarily. Then she smiled tiredly. "Thanks. If the gentleman does not mind." I looked up from my newspaper. "Not at all. Go ahead, please." She sat in front of me. A woman of approximately 58 years, brown hair with natural gray streaks tied in a simple ponytail. No makeup. Deep and sad honey-colored eyes. She wore comfortable clothes, jeans, navy blue sweater, sneakers. She carried a worn book under her arm, 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez. We ordered our coffees in silence. She took out the book. I returned to my newspaper. 20 minutes passed without exchanging a word. We mutually respected our spaces. Then she sighed audibly, closed her book frustrated. "I have been trying to finish this chapter for 3 months. My mind wanders constantly." She said it more to herself than to me, but I responded instinctively. The same thing happened to me after becoming a widower. Reading became impossible for months. Linda looked at me surprised then, with immediate understanding. "Also widowed," she said softly. It was not a question, it was recognition. 5 years ago, I confirmed. 4 for me, she replied. We looked at each other for seconds that seemed to stretch out. 2 strangers connected instantly by shared loss. David Miller. I introduced myself, extending my hand. Linda Johnson. She shook my hand firmly. Her touch was warm, real. "Are you from here?" she asked. "No. Chicago. I arrived 3 weeks ago looking for, I don't know, fresh air." She smiled understandingly. "I am from here. Retired elementary school teacher. Well, retired early after my husband James died. Heart attack in July 2020. 59 years old. Perfectly healthy. He went out for a run one morning and simply collapsed, her voice breaking slightly. I told her about Emily. The cancer. The 5 agonizing months. At least I could say goodbye. I said, "You did not have that chance." "I do not know what is worse," she replied. Saying goodbye, watching them suffer, or losing them without warning. We also talked about children. Linda had 2, a son, engineer living in Seattle with his own family, and a daughter, doctor working in Los Angeles. "Good kids," she said. "They call weekly, visit occasionally, but they have busy lives. I do not blame them." I noticed melancholy in her words. I told her vaguely about Michael, omitting painful details. In mid-May, Linda invited me to hike in the hills. "I need exercise and company. Walking alone depresses me," she explained. I accepted immediately. We climbed the green hill breathing fresh air, stopping frequently to admire spectacular views of the bay. At the top, sitting on a wooden bench looking at the infinite ocean, Linda asked softly, "David, what really brought you to Santa Barbara? There is deep pain in your eyes that goes beyond widowhood." I hesitated. I had been avoiding that conversation for 6 weeks. But something in Linda's sincerity made me trust her. I told her everything. Michael, Jessica, Robert, the public humiliation, the secret sale, the escape. Words flowed uncontrollably. Linda listened without interrupting, holding my hand when my voice broke. When I finished, she remained silent for long minutes, processing. "You did the right thing," she said finally with absolute firmness. "You protected your dignity. Your son chose to betray you consciously. The consequences are his, not yours." Tears sprang from my eyes. "But he is my son, Linda. What father does this? A father who respects himself," she replied. "Emily would want to see you happy, not begging for crumbs of affection." Those words released something inside me. I cried openly while Linda hugged me. After 40 years holding everything together, finally I allowed myself to collapse in the arms of someone who genuinely understood. June came transforming us. Linda and I were inseparable. We had breakfast together, walked daily, attended small concerts, cooked simple dinners in my apartment or hers. It was not passionate, youthful romance. It was mature companionship based on mutual respect and shared experiences of loss. One afternoon in mid-June, exactly the 17th, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was 6 in the evening. Linda was with me. We had cooked fish for dinner. I looked at the intercom confused. "Who could it be?" I murmured. I pressed the button. "Yes." Silence. Then a broken voice. Unmistakable. "Dad, it is Michael." My heart stopped. Linda looked at me alarmed. "Do you want me to go?" she whispered. I shook my head. "Stay, please." I breathed deeply. "Come up," I said, pressing the button that unlocked the main door. 2 eternal minutes later, they knocked on my door. I opened slowly. Michael was in front of me. Unrecognizable. He had easily lost 20 pounds. Deep circles under his eyes, unkempt beard, wrinkled clothes, devastated expression. He seemed to have aged 10 years and 2 months. "Dad," he whispered with a broken voice. His eyes filled immediately with tears. He tried to hug me. I took a step back instinctively. "Come in," I said coldly. Michael entered, looking around the modest apartment. Then he noticed Linda observing from the kitchen. "She is Linda." "Linda, my son Michael." Both nodded awkwardly. "How did you find me?" I asked with a controlled voice. Michael swallowed hard. "I hired a private investigator. It cost me 6 weeks to locate you." "Dad, I need to talk to you. I need to explain." "There is nothing to explain," I interrupted. "Everything is perfectly clear. Now tell me what you want." "Sorry," said Michael, falling apart. He literally knelt in front of me, sobbing. "Forgive me, Dad. I was an idiot, a terrible son. Robert manipulated me. Jessica blinded me. But that does not justify anything. I betrayed you. I humiliated you. I lost everything important to impress people who were worth nothing." His words came out broken between violent sobs. I looked at my son kneeling, destroyed, begging. Part of me wanted to hug him, forgive him, restore what was lost. But another part, stronger, remembered every lonely Sunday, every empty excuse, every moment where he chose Robert over me. I remembered 200 faces laughing while he humiliated me publicly. "Michael, get up," I ordered firmly. He obeyed, trembling. I looked him directly in his red eyes. "You lost the right to call me Dad when you abandoned me after your mother died. For 5 years I needed you. I called you. I invited you. I cooked for 2, waiting for you Sunday after Sunday. Do you know how many times you appeared? 3 times in 2 years. 3 miserable times." I know, he moaned. "I was selfish. I was blinded by ambition." I interrupted. "You chose to impress Robert while I ate alone every damn weekend looking at your mother's empty chair. Now you come here seeking what exactly? Forgiveness? Money? Restoration of inheritance?" "I just want you back," he cried. "I lost everything, Dad. The company, the apartment. Jessica left me 3 weeks ago. Robert does not speak to me. I am working as a junior manager in a logistics company earning minimum wage. I live alone in a rented apartment. But none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that I lost my father for being an idiot. You did not lose your father, I said with a calm but firm voice. You abandoned your father. There is a substantial difference. I looked for you tirelessly for years. You ignored me systematically. The consequences of your actions are yours exclusively. Live with them. Linda watched silently from the kitchen, tears running down her cheeks. Is there no chance to fix this? Michael pleaded desperately. None? I looked at him for a long time. Michael, you are 36 years old enough to rebuild a life independently. Learn from this. Value those who love you unconditionally, before losing them permanently. But I can no longer be that person for you. I need peace after decades of sacrifice. Michael looked towards Linda, seeking perhaps an ally, but she simply shook her head gently. Your father deserves peace, she said with compassion but firmness. Respect that at least. Michael nodded, defeated. Can I call you occasionally? Know that you are okay? I considered the question carefully. No. I need to close this chapter completely. Find your own way without depending on me. I extended my hand formally. Michael shook it, trembling. Then he tried to hug me one last time. I allowed the hug, briefly feeling his body shake with sobs, but I did not reciprocate with affection. It was a hug of definitive farewell. Take care, Michael, I said, separating myself. That is all I can offer you. My son left the apartment walking like an old man. Linda closed the door behind him. She hugged me immediately while I processed the encounter. You did the right thing, she whispered. It was incredibly difficult, but right. I nodded against her shoulder, allowing myself to feel the sharp pain of that definitive closure. That night, I did not sleep well. Images of Michael as a child laughing on the beach, celebrating birthdays, graduating college, contrasted cruelly with the destroyed man I had just said goodbye to. Part of me questioned if I had been too hard, but I also remembered every broken promise, every ignored Sunday, every choice where Robert mattered more than me. Linda stayed with me that night, simply holding my hand in silence. Her presence was healing balm. In the morning, while we drank coffee watching the sunrise from my balcony, she told me, David, you spent decades building for others. Now build something for yourself. She was right. 62 years old, and finally free of crushing obligations. July brought complete transformation. Linda and I decided to travel, something neither had really done after becoming widowed. We rented a small car and toured the coast for 2 weeks. We visited tiny fishing villages, ate fresh seafood in family restaurants, walked deserted beaches, talked for hours about everything and nothing. It was not cinematic romance. It was something better. Genuine companionship between two mature souls who perfectly understood the value of simplicity. One afternoon, sharing a bottle of wine, watching the ocean, Linda took my hand. Thanks for letting me join you in this, she said softly. Thanks for reminding me that I can still be happy. I kissed her forehead. Thanks for appearing exactly when I needed to believe in human connections again. August. We returned to Santa Barbara renewed. We established a shared routine but respecting individual spaces. Linda spent 3 nights a week in my apartment. I spent 2 in hers. We cooked together, read simultaneously in comfortable silence, attended local cultural events. Nothing dramatic, simply daily life shared peacefully. Meanwhile, in Chicago, as I learned later from my niece Ashley, who maintained limited contact with Michael, my son, faced brutal reality. Jessica had filed for divorce formally in July. The division of assets turned out devastating for Michael. The apartment they shared, bought mostly with a bank loan under both names, had to be sold. After paying the remaining mortgage, barely $20,000 remained to divide, $10,000 each. Michael looked for cheap housing. He rented a small studio in a working-class neighborhood far from downtown for cheap. His salary barely covered rent, basic services, food. Nothing was left for luxuries he took for granted previously. Robert Turner, according to what Ashley told me, publicly discredited Michael in business circles. The guy turned out incompetent. He did not know how to handle even his own family inheritance. Robert commented in meetings. That damaged reputation followed Michael. Companies where he applied for better positions checked references, spoke with Robert, and rejected applications immediately. Michael was trapped in a mediocre job without real possibilities of promotion. His boss, general manager of a logistics company, treated him condescendingly. "Miller, I thought you came from a successful business family. What happened?" He joked cruelly in front of colleagues. Michael endured daily humiliations out of absolute economic necessity. September 2024. Linda and I celebrated 6 months of knowing each other. We dined at an elegant restaurant on the hill with spectacular views of the illuminated bay. "David, these months with you have been medicine for my soul," Linda confessed, holding a glass of wine. "I thought I would die alone and bitter. You showed me that there is still beauty possible." I took her hand over the table. "You saved my sanity, Linda. I arrived here shattered. You helped me remember who I am beyond a failed father." That night, walking along the pier under stars, Linda asked, "Do you ever think about Michael?" "Honestly," I replied, "daily, but no longer with sharp pain. Rather with melancholy for what could have been and will never be. I made peace with that loss." "Do you think he will learn?" she insisted. "I sincerely hope so, although it will probably take a long time to fully understand what was lost. My life now is radically different. Waking up without urgent alarms, without crushing business responsibilities, without ungrateful children demanding attention. I simply exist peacefully. Linda and I have built a beautiful routine: quiet breakfasts, reading newspapers, daily walks along coastal paths, afternoons cooking traditional recipes, nights watching classic movies hugged on the sofa. I invested the $4 million intelligently. Sarah Evans advised me excellently. Conservative index funds, government bonds, small rental properties. I generate monthly passive income of approximately $5,000 without working, more than enough to live comfortably. Travel occasionally, help my niece Ashley when she needs it. Linda finally sold her apartment in August and moved permanently with me. We bought together a larger condo, 3 bedrooms with a spectacular balcony facing the ocean. We decorated it, combining our tastes. Photographs of Emily and James occupy places of honor, remembering lost loves without competing with present love. We are mature partners who understand perfectly that second chances do not replace first loves. Simply honor them moving forward. We travel frequently. We toured Europe for 3 weeks in July. We plan to visit Italy next April. Simple things I postponed 40 years, building a business empire for an ungrateful son. Now I live exclusively for myself, and that liberation is extraordinary. Do I think about Michael? Constantly. Not with burning rage, but with deep sadness for a relationship destroyed irreparably. Ashley updates me occasionally on his situation. Michael still works in that mediocre logistics company, earning slightly more now after a small raise. He lives alone in that modest studio. No partner since Jessica abandoned him. No real friends because those who surrounded him sought connections with Robert or my company. Ashley says he changed notably. More humble, reserved, silent worker. He no longer shows off or seeks to impress. He arrives early to his job, fulfills tasks efficiently, returns home without socializing. Weekends he cleans his apartment, cooks simple meals, reads books he never had time to appreciate. Solitary existence building slowly from absolute zero. Apparently he visited Emily's grave last March, anniversary of her death. Ashley saw him casually. Michael was kneeling in front of the tombstone crying, talking to his mother for an hour. "Mom, forgive me. I disappointed Dad. I disappointed your memory. If you could see me now, you would be ashamed," he sobbed. Ashley did not approach, respecting that private moment of pain. Do I feel compassion? Of course. He is still my son biologically. But compassion does not mean rescue. Michael needed to learn hard lessons that words would never teach. Respect is not bought with money or inheritances. Family is not humiliated publicly to impress strangers. Loyalty is demonstrated consistently, especially during difficult moments. If I could change something, it would not be my decision to sell and leave. It would be having established firmer limits years earlier. Maybe if I had confronted the first canceled Sunday, the first empty excuse, the first derogatory comment influenced by Robert, everything would have been different. But I was always a permissive father, believing that unconditional love meant tolerating everything. I learned late that true love includes establishing clear limits. Emily would have handled this better. She balanced tenderness and firmness perfectly. When Michael was a rebellious teenager, Emily knew exactly when to hug and when to discipline. I simply worked tirelessly, providing materially, assuming that was enough. How wrong was I? This afternoon, while Linda and I walk along the beach, I observe young couples with small children, fathers carrying babies, building sandcastles, laughing carefree. I feel acute nostalgia for those simple moments with Michael 30 years ago, but I also feel peace knowing that I did absolutely everything possible for him. The rest were his choices. Linda notices my melancholic expression. Thinking about Michael? She asks softly. I nod. He will always be there in some corner of my mind. She kisses my cheek. That makes you human, David. But remember, you chose dignity over begging. That was the right decision then and now. You are right. I do not regret it. If Michael appeared tomorrow, having genuinely learned, having changed deeply, maybe we would talk civilly, but I will never restore what was lost. That trust, that unconditional father-son love died that night in March, along with my illusion of an ideal family. Now I have something different, but valuable. Inner peace, loving company with Linda, financial freedom, unlimited time to enjoy simplicities. At my 63 years, finally I live for myself. And although the price was devastatingly high, it was absolutely worth every tear shed. The story of Michael and me ends here, not with cinematic reconciliation or magical forgiveness. It ends with a father choosing self-respect over manipulative guilt, with a son learning brutal lessons about permanent consequences, with both living separate lives carrying different weights of the same relational failure. If someone hears this story, I hope it teaches this. Value unconditionally those who genuinely love you. Never sacrifice real family to impress strangers, and remember always that personal dignity is not negotiable, not even for blood ties. If you like this story, support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us your opinions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box that appears on the left. Thanks for joining us.